A year or so ago, I did a lot of work on this 68 custom Deluxe Reverb. Recapped it, did some tweaks, took all the noise out, had a bad preamp tube, had a bad pair of 6v6s, and here it is a little while later, and the owner says it is blowing fuses. So let's take a look and see what's going on. My money is on the 6v6s, but let's be sure. You can see a lot of the work I did last time. Let me get these leads for this meter untangled from each other. You can see the 100 ohm heater balance resistors here added to this octal socket. They don't have any discoloration. The 3 watt 470 ohms are still present, look good. 475, 475. Everything looks good, nothing smells funky. I seriously doubt it's one of the new filter caps. The most likely thing is either the rectifier tube, which is still the original Fender branded, I believe it's a Sovtech, or the Electroharmonic 6v6s, which I did put in here. Just because the the EH 6v6s are the best ones on the market these days, does not mean that they are great. So I'm gonna power it up, connected to my light bulb limiter, and watch and see what happens. Before I do that, I'm going to check that the fuse is good and the correct value, and that it's, hey look, it's all loose. Isn't that fun? So it is a blown 2 amp fuse. Let me get another one in there after I tighten that up. All right, fuse holder tightened up. New slow blow 2 amp fuse in place. All right, with the light bulb limiter, I'm going to power it on, but leave it in standby. That will tell me if there's a problem with the heater supply or the rectifier tube. I'm watching it warm up. Seemingly no issue. Let me move the camera and let you see the output tubes, the 6v6s, when I take it out of standby. I turned the lights down a bit so you get a more dramatic view. Let's see what's going on here. Take it out of standby. Huh. A little bit of microphonics, but no light show. Let me check some voltages while that's happening, while it just warms up a bit more. All right, so no current limiter. Negative 37 volts. That's the grid of each. 411.8 at the screen of each. And the plate, 411. That seems very hot to me. So I'm going to see where these tubes are biased at. I'm wondering if someone adjusted that bias pot after the amp left me. So let me power it off, let it cool down, and reset the bias, because 408, that would be something that I would associate with a very hot bias, which can cause problems with tubes. Negative 37 is also on the hot range with a Deluxe Reverb, so stay tuned just a moment. Well, I measured the bias, and one tube's at about 58, the other one's at about 63% dissipation, so a little bit hotter than when they left me, and not a perfect match, but there's no hum in the output section. And just to rule some things out, I took the doghouse cover off. The caps I put in all measure fine. Everything looks and seems to measure just fine. But even with those, I like to check once in a while. So I'm gonna call the owner in just a moment and see how long it is between fuses blowing and what the conditions are. And the other thing I need to check is that it still has that plastic molded speaker cable from the factory. If that thing has a problem, the amp could be intermittently losing its output and something could be wanting to arc. But so far, this thing looks exactly healthy. Obviously, it's not. Had that blown fuse when it came in. So this one's not going to be as cut and dried as many others. But that's okay. We like a challenge. Well, I spoke to the owner, and he reminded me a little bit of the history of this amp. While I have notes and service records, I don't always remember everything without looking them up. And I had done the majority of this work over a year ago. And then this past summer, the amp came back in for blowing fuses. And in that situation, at that time, he'd been playing an outdoor venue, an outdoor festival stage, and the amp had been sitting in the sun, real hot Memphis sun, for several hours before he did the gig, before their set started. Then halfway through the set, it blew a fuse, and I could not replicate that here at all. And I had to let it run on a looper for like 12 hours. So in that case, I even did a video about that and talking about how glass fuses versus sand fuses and stuff, and ambient temperature can make a difference. And who knows what the voltage at that outdoor festival actually was. Seemed to be one of those things that happened, and it hasn't happened since. Now it's 6 months later or so, and he was using this at a gig, and on the very last song of the very last set, it just stopped. And he's talked to the sound guy there, and the sound guy there said, "Yeah, that happens a lot here. People's amps blow fuses. We think there's something wrong with the venue wiring." So he took it home and he changed out the fuse, and he was playing it home, and shortly after that, the fuse blew again. And that's when he brought it to me. And I cannot find, so far, anything wrong with the amp. My thought was maybe this crappy plastic molded cable and plug might be causing it to cut out, but it's not. And I've been letting it run for about an hour and a half now on the current limiter, and everything is very hot. And, it's got the cream back speaker. The only thing that I notice now is there's a little bit of microphonics. And that comes out sometimes from the speaker, causing them to vibrate. So, while I'm really not trying to play cover my butt or anything, I do think that it's highly likely that it's time to get a new pair of tubes in there. These are the Electro-Harmonix 6v6s. I think it's time to try some TAD red bass 6v6s and see if we have a better result. Now, the ones I just showed you are here for another amp, but I'll talk to the owner about this. I really think that the most likely cause of blowing fuses are either the rectifier tube or the 6v6s, and they have definitely drifted. He says he's not touched the bias. I know from my notes that the last time I worked on this amp, they were biased about 53% idle. Now this one's at 58, this one's at 64. So between that bias changing, the tubes themselves have changed, and that slight bit of glassy resonance. I could show you more, but it would clip the lav mic. I'm thinking a new pair of 6v6s are the way to go. The thing I don't want to have happen is for him to pay, $80 for the new pair of 6v6s and to go use it on a gig and have the same thing happen. But this is one of those things where the car doesn't make the noise for the mechanic. And I've poked and prodded and done all kinds of stuff. And even went in there with my scope, and there's no oscillation, anything happening to draw power that we can't hear. This amp really does seem to be healthy. I do have a scope. I use the scope all the time. I don't show the scope in many videos because I'd spend as much time explaining what I'm doing as it takes to repair the amp, and that's just not really feasible. Most of you don't have a scope. Most of you would not know what to do with a scope, and a scope is really not that useful for a musician to own. And I also don't want to subject you to a bunch of sine waves and square waves because they sound awful. But both channels sound quite nice. So that's where I'm at, and I will talk to the owner, but I imagine you will see this in a couple of days with some TADs, and hopefully it won't blow fuses for him again. We shall see.